Welcome back to the channel, guys. It's MAZZ back again today with another video for you guys. Today we're going to start on the body work on the Cherokee hard body from Club 5 Racing. This is something you can do if you're really picky, or this body can pretty much go straight to primer and be painted if you're not. So I, however, am picky. So I'm going to take the time, even though I'm going to probably roll this body over the first time I drive it. I'm going to take the time. I'm going to fill the seams. Got some holes where we're not using for the flat fenders. But first off, I have some CA glue. I'll show you what we're going to use that for here shortly. Got some Mr. Hobby, Mr. White Putty, and some Tamiya sponge sanding sheets. I also have, not on camera, some regular sandpaper, 400, 600, 800, I believe is what or 400, 800, 1000 is what I have. I also have some flat blocks that I use, just different stuff. Anything flat that you can use to sand a small area. But first off, what we're going to start with is the CA glue. So we'll put this stuff over to the side. And we're going to start with the one thing I want to get rid of mainly is the seam in this body. So as you can see, if I flex it, you can see it open up. Well, I don't want to paint it and then it take a hard hit and put a crack in the paint all the way across. So what I've already done is loosened the top 3 middle bolts here just a little bit so that I can flex it open a little bit extra like I just showed you. Then I'm going to take some of this tire glue. I'm going to run it down the seam while it's open. I won't be able to do this on camera because I need like 2 legs and 2 arms and really need an extra arm on top of that to do this. But I'm going to basically run it down through here, try to clean it back up. I'll probably use, if I can get it quick enough, I'll probably use an alcohol swab just to clean off the excess. This is a medium glue, so it'll dry pretty quick, but nothing like extra thin or something that just instantly dries. So alcohol wipe. I have a rag over here as well. So I'm gonna mainly just try to get this to go down in this gap as much as possible. I am going to scuff it with a little bit of Scotch-Brite. Find the one I need. A little bit of red Scotch-Brite just to prep it. So we'll just get a little corner of this. We don't need much. Take this guy here and we're just going to scuff everywhere that we think the glue is going to touch. And this does a good job of getting in all the cracks and crevices, just due to the nature of the Scotch-Brite fibers. But basically we're just trying to go through there. That way anything that sits on top, I've showed y'all before, but this has a little dip in it. I'm not going to fill this dip completely smooth because it's going to be painted white. You're not going to really notice it, but you can tell I took the shine off. That center, everything else around it is glossy. The center is dull. So just a little bit more of that. And I'm going to jump off camera. I'm going to get some of this glue in between here and get the body tightened back up. And then I'll be back with you guys. We got the roof glued, and as you can see, we got a clean little bead down there. It's real thin. It will not move. What I did was I put a little bit of tape on each side at the end, this side and this side, and left it where it would lay out, and then I could run the glue down and let it kind of gravity this way and then I gravity that way. And then I just came back while it was semi cured and scraped off with a little alcohol swab as much as I could, because we're going to body work over this. So like I said, there's a dip right there. So this is the lowest point anyway. And then from there, what I went ahead and did was prep all these holes. So we got where the new flares, they're just going to glue on from the back. We don't need any of these holes. Plus, that's not there on a 1-to-1. Front and rear, there's 2 holes. Then on the tailgate, this is not on the 1-to-1 because this is where they bump, where this bumper bolts onto when you snap it in. So we're getting rid of all those holes, and by doing that, I put a little bit of tape on each side, on each hole, all the way around. Have that all taped up. And then I kind of went with a safety pin afterwards, and I poked a little hole, or at least pushed the tape away from the back a little bit to give it some air for the glue, because we're going to still use CA glue because of how hard it cures. And what I did is went down in each one of these little holes with some Scotch-Brite, then came back with alcohol after I prepped everything with Scotch-Brite and wiped it down. And now, when I come back the next time, I'm going to have all these holes filled with some CA glue. I just want it to come up barely above it, and the reason we pushed that little pin down to give it some room is I wouldn't mind it coming out a little bit on the bottom and having a little excess behind it to keep it. It'll kind of hold it as a mechanical bond as well. So I'm going to have to take the time to do each side, then the back, then the top. So I'm not going to bore y'all with doing that on camera. It's as simple as dripping this down into it. The thinner the better. This is medium, and medium is still pretty thin. Extra thin is probably going to be so thin that it's going to be too quick to work with. So keep that in mind. Once I get these holes filled, I'll come back and show you where we're at. So we got the holes all around. We got the tape off as well. That medium glue works well. It's probably hard to see. I'm just above the panel on every one of them. Maybe a little high on this one, but that's no big deal. Can even take a X-Acto knife and carve some of that off before we start sanding. But mainly what you're trying to do is just get a base for your bodywork. I would not want to fill this with Mr. Putty, these holes. It just isn't going to get in there good enough, and it's not going to be solid enough. This stuff basically dries like plastic CA glue does. Even when it's dry, you could even drill this back out and it's going to look like you're drilling plastic. It's going to be clear little spirals coming off your drill bit. So we got the back done as well. The top. I did not use glue on these two little holes, these dimples. I am going to use some Mr. Putty on it. Get y'all a little light. So we will get our Mr. Putty, Mr. White Putty. I've already opened it. It's clear, or it's clean, ready to go. We'll just get a little bit of that out and literally just barely touch it. You can see how the consistency is very thin in this stuff. This is like a little filler putty. Nothing like Bondo, not that crazy, heavy, you know, thick, viscous stuff. It's more pliable, a lot more pliable. So I'm looking for something just to kind of move that around a little bit with. We'll use our little toothpick here. You want to be as neat as possible with this, even clean up a little bit as you go. You want to leave this a little high. I kind of texture it up top to make sure we're up high. You want to leave that up high. This stuff sands very easy. So we'll clean up this little excess. It comes right up. Get right up on that hole. Now, I usually do like to push that down in there a little bit. If I can find the other, oh yeah, here we go. Sorry guys, these videos are on the fly. So, just take this little alcohol wipe and we'll just, you want to get some excess and push that down in the hole. Get all the excess, because this will shrink up a little bit. This paste will shrink up just a little bit. So you'll want to get as much of it right on that hole as possible. Even if you gotta use your fingers, it's okay. You can wipe it off with acetone or, you know, your favorite. We'll need just a touch more on that other side. And actually what we're gonna do, we're gonna let that dry first before we apply anything else. But I just like to get it started and make sure it's pressed down in those holes. So as you can see, there's not very much extra. This one still has a little dip, but we're gonna let that dry. So I'm gonna let that dry. I'm gonna reapply one more thing of putty. I'll probably rough this back up. I definitely will rough this back up after it dries. Get all this sanded off, and then I'm gonna come back with putty again on all the holes we filled after I sand them down. We're just gonna skim coat them and make sure that glue's not there, that we got a little bit of putty over it. And also go across our seam. And I may show you something a little different. Sometimes I thin this putty down with some lacquer thinner. Makes it a thinner, even thinner consistency, and you can brush it and get a real fine layer to go across here after we sand it. But either way, let me get this sanded down, get these parts prepped, and then I'll come back and show you where we're at. We got all our preliminary body work done. As you can see, pretty clean on the roof now. Now what works great about that CA glue is the back side, the back mold was a little bit proud of the front. And what that did is when I put that glue in there, it actually has a gradual downhill now right here. And when I go back in, I'm going to do a part 2 to this. So when I go back in part 2 and we take our Mr. White Putty, and we go back and go through this whole seam and get everything completely flat, that'll just be to an advantage for us to have that already there so that we're not filling a ton of stuff with putty. So some people are going to tell you they do this differently, and everybody has their own way. Now, I don't like any CA glue to touch any sort of paint. So I like to bury it between as much stuff as I can. So that's why I'm going to do the Mr. White Putty next. That'll put a barrier in between our filler primer that'll go on the roof. And where I sanded down this, we lost a little body line up front. So we'll do some filler primer, maybe some putty. We'll definitely do putty all over this anyway. So I'll bring that body line back. It's nothing major. But as you can see, it's now strong. It's not going to come apart. It's filled. Like I said, I like to bury that because even cured CA glue can affect base coat when you're spraying it. It can craze it from underneath. It can do stuff down the road to it, gassing out underneath it if you don't have it. You know, I don't even like doing it, even letting it cure for a long time. I like to put something over top of it, put a barrier between that and I'll do a filler primer and a high build primer. And what that'll do, after I do the Mr. White Putty, the little bit of filler primer will actually probably take most of this dip out completely, even though we weren't trying to. So very quick and easy way. This is going to be a part 1. You can see how clean those holes filled with just CA glue. There are a couple little tiny pit holes from where I sanded and there was a little air bubble, but that's where our little putty will come back in. We got our putty up top, nice and smooth over those 2 little dimples that were there. So we're nice and clean there. But like always, guys, tell me down in the comments if you do it a different way or you thought I could do something different. I'm always looking for new and fresh ideas, you know, to make life easier. But this is the way that I found to make it quick. I also do use some activator, especially when filling these holes that are more, you know, not a bunch of area, but it's deep. And it's hard for this stuff to cure when it's in a big bubble. So I take this, it automatically hardens it. you don't want to get too much because this CA glue is way harder to sand than the plastic. And that's why you kind of lose a little bit of body lines. You see how this kind of disappears? I'll bring all that back, which this was kind of messed up anyway because the bolt hole was there. Same way right here. The bolt hole kind of messed up in the where the body line was, but I can bring that body line back now. But like always, tell me down in the comments what you think. Tell me a joke or something, make me laugh. And as always, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Like and subscribe to the channel. Turn that notification bell on so that you're notified every time we get a new video up. And until next time, guys, y'all have a good one.